Hello YouTube, and today I wanted to go over an over-the-board game that I played at the Atlanta Chess Center. My opponent's rating was 1496, I believe. I'm currently rated approximately 1850. So we had a pretty strong opponent based upon his rating, but of course this is just an instructive game. I played black that I wanted to go over with you. With some tactics and stuff and an opening that I've never really seen as far as the way it's been played. But of course, this was a nice game to play, and it was very fun. I do believe we have I always get the semi-Slav and Slav confused. I believe this is a Slav defense. And typically, of course, E6 is played, but I played Knight F6. And the very interesting move here, G6. I won't go over theory or anything as far as this move G6 goes, but of course G6 is playable. I don't know if it's played at the top levels, but it is a move that allows you to develop your bishop and kind of solidifies the center once you develop your bishop by locking it down and putting your bishop on the long square diagonal. So here I kind of laid a little bit of a trap as well with G6 with the move bishop to G5. Completely playable. White holds a slight advantage per the engine and probably per lines. I guess this is a book. Like I said, I'm not familiar with this opening name specifically, but of course, if you want to leave comments for the opening name, I'd be more than happy, of course, start learning opening names. I just memorize, of course, my own games, or try to remember my own games, and play positions that I feel like I hold some type of slight advantage or advantage, etc. So we have knight to knight to E4. And immediately I knew, of course, like I said, I laid this little trap. Of course, if knight takes, playing against a 1400, almost 1500, I thought it would be very tempting for the 1500 rough. We'll call him a 1500, of course, to take the knight. So my engine is actually broken. But you can trust me that I am slightly better here after pawn takes. And there's the engine, it goes. It will not work after a few moves here. But I was slightly, not annoyed, but surprised actually by what the engine recommends is the best move and what he played, which is knight back to D2. I was expecting knight back to G1, which seems a little counterintuitive, but this move right here ends up blundering a pawn. As far as the pawn goes, is it safe to take? Being as which, I spent probably about 5 minutes on this variation to take the pawn, because I was constantly calculating out what happens after queen c2. Queen c2 is objectively probably the best move, and it was played into the game. And from queen c2, I also calculated out, rook b1, and from here, of course, we have now a double attack on the center pawn, and it looks like I probably need to defend it if I want to hold on to my pawn advantage. However, of course, there is a better move here. There's sometimes always a good move and a best move, or a better move, etc. And the move that I played here, you can go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to try to find it, is a very interesting move. Typically, of course, your hint is that typically center pawns are worth more than wing pawns. But, of course, I can develop a piece and be able to attack a wing pawn. So the move, of course, if you've guessed it, is bishop to g7, which is objectively the best move here in this position, because I develop a piece, I threaten a pawn for a pawn. However, as far as this pawn goes, I really was a little skeptical to take it. So from this position, of course, we have an interesting move with white. Rook to d1. I calculated this out too. That was a part of my 5-10 minute thought process of after queen to c7. I actually calculated this move out as well, which I was like, okay, what happens if a rook to d1? With rook to d1, there's a discovered attack, but the only discovered attack that actually does anything is knight takes pawn. So with that, I just made sure and calculated out with a couple more minutes, of course, what should I play here, f5, or should I play bishop to f5? And objectively, of course, by developing another piece, bishop to f5 probably was better, but I decided to go with f5. And from here, of course, the discovered attacks, like I said, there's really nothing that he can do. You can go ahead and analyze this on your own, which I'll provide the game with the FEN, or is it FEN? Yes, FEN and PGN at the end. And I give a little special FEN at the end because, well, I'll go ahead and tell you at the end. And it'll be for anybody who is rated probably like, maybe 600, 500 to 600 or something on up to, if you feel that you're really weak in the end game, 1,000, 1,200-ish to be able to play that. And especially without blundering pieces. So, of course, spoiler alert, I do win this game. But on to the game. B4, or else he'd lose the pawn. There was also the opportunity for him to play defensively and move rook back to B1. As far as rook back to B1, that would have been a pretty solid move as well, in my opinion. But he would still be playing a pawn down. Note that I am a pawn up, just a little underdeveloped. I offer a queen trade, which is the best move suggested by the engine as well. Last time I analyzed this with the engine. Of course, unfortunately, my engine is glitching out right now, and I don't know if Lichess is down, or this is my phone, or if it's just me having to refresh my screen. So it took me a while to actually, I probably spent about 5 or 10 minutes to offer this queen trade. And it was because my opponent was playing pretty fast. I actually was going through the line after queen to a4. So after queen to a4, there is which I didn't go through the line, but we'll go through a little bit of a line here. Knight to a6. And black can't play queen to the move b5. There's a one move tactic here, of course, that you can play. That hint, it wins the queen, and that is knight to c5. So as far as the b5 move goes, it was objectively, of course, probably something that I shouldn't have really worried about. And as far as queen to a4, I probably shouldn't have worried about it too much, because the queen would be offsides, and a3, of course, still solidifies the queen side, and I'm still a pawn up, and I'm going to be able to develop pretty naturally and possibly play king to f7 to get my king out of the way for my rooks and possibly connect my rooks. But this didn't happen in the game. I thought it probably would have been best for white to play this way. He plays, after the queen offers trade, queen to b1, which really surprised me because I was like, immediately I noticed that I had a pretty decent little advantage, is what I thought in my head, at least, of course. I have a pinned piece here that my queen is controlling for against the knight, so the knight can't move. My queen is in a pretty decent square. I'm a little underdeveloped, and I'm also have a very big space advantage. So with all these factors, of course, I thought that my position was pretty solid, and I'm a pawn up. So I wasn't really scared, but I knew that I always had the opportunity to take it to an endgame with queen to b2, which I just thought wasted time and wouldn't be an effective use of a tempo / a move. So I played bishop to e6. Objectively looking back, and with the engine, you could probably analyze the stronger move here would have been knight to a6. The reason why I didn't move knight to a6 is because I thought that my knight probably deserved a better square, such as knight to e5, which I was going to go through knight to e5 with knight to d7. But this didn't really happen in the game. I ended up, after the indirect threat to try to take the pawn, playing knight to a6 anyway. So I want you to notice, of course, that this pawn, even if he wouldn't have moved to e3, can't be taken, because if I end up taking the pawn, white has a very strong move, rook to c1, and you'll just have to visualize it because I can't move twice. But if he just played, let's just say, actually I can make something crazy like this. Bishop takes pawn. White can play the move here, and my bishop pretty much becomes trapped by winning the bishop. So this didn't happen in the game, of course. But of course we had, which I thought e3 was probably kind of forced in a way anyway, because white needs to develop his light square bishop. So we have knight to a6 and then bishop to e2, which I think, as far as bishop to e2 goes, it surprised me a little bit because I thought I could take this pawn. The key thing about this pawn is, can it be taken? There is a 6-move combination that wins the game pretty much by me taking this pawn if white ends up playing inaccurately, which he did play inaccurately. So go ahead and analyze for yourself if I should be able to take this pawn, and what moves do you think are best. So, you know, if you wanted to pause the video, you had your chance to pause the video, and I did decide to take this pawn. Now, the key thing here is, should white go into a queen trade? Now, if white trades queens, he's going to be down 2 pawns, and on top of which, we're going to be going into an endgame. But there might be the tactics as well. So you can go ahead and pause the video again if you did not see the tactics for a queen trade, which this is the 6-move combination still that I'm talking about. Should white end up playing queen to c2, this would be a total of 6 moves as well. Still, no, not 6 moves. This would be just winning a pawn. So as far as the 6-move calculation combo with the queen trade, that's what I was not forced, but I had to calculate out. So queen to c2 just wins the pawn, but what you can plug into the engine, I believe, queen to c2 probably would be the best move, playing just the pawns down with a cramped position for white. But the queen trades and knight takes, and the following move, rook to b1. So this is where the calculation really should probably take place, but you had to see it beforehand as far as what would happen if I took the pawn and there was a queen trade, because I knew that as far as queen to c2, I just win another pawn. So we're at, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Bishop to c3. I defend the knight, and I'm attacking the knight with a pin. I really wanted to pause the video again, but, you know, I ended up making moves too fast. So this is the strong position that I'm on, that I'm winning right now in a pretty convincing way, which white, of course, directly responds with a pretty solid move, a little bit of a surprising move that he's not seeing the full variation, which is pawn to a3. So stronger here than the move I played is castle's queenside. But I was a little worried if castle's queenside that my e-pawn is hanging. And the move that I played is relatively just as strong, which is rook to d8. So I thought I was able to defend my e-pawn, but I'm leaving my b-pawn hanging. But I said, hey, no problem. As far as my e-pawn goes, this is not something that I'm worried about. My b-pawn goes. I'm not worried about my b-pawn because I'm assuming my opponent's going to take the pawn or take the knight. Strongest move here is probably to take the knight. Maybe you can plug it into the engine, and we can see, of course, or you can see later, of course, what's probably in this position. But I'm completely winning in this position. So pawn takes knight, and this is a part of the second to last move, part of the variation that is the key star move out of the 6-move combo, that technically, I guess if you look a little deeper, we can say 8 moves, of course, that you had to see, and that is rook takes knight. Bishop takes knight just isn't strong enough. From rook takes knight, the strongest move here probably is to get out of the discovered attack and white to play a cramped position with king to f1 possibly. And this is what I was calculating on, that I thought I would have a strong position with 2 pawns up and be able to slowly, of course, have activity. And my pieces, of course, just come to life. Now, you're probably saying, of course, why not trade down? And there are other threats, which could be a possibility with a rook move. And we will go ahead and see, actually, a rook move was played. The rook move that I would suggest if you moved a rook to trade down pieces would be rook to c1. This still allows a discovered attack, but we're able to trade down rooks, and black can win another pawn. So this is probably maybe his best bet. If he was going, I think he touched his rook. I don't remember during the over the board. Of course, it's touch move for USCF standards, USCF rules. So he did end up moving his rook, but that was not the move. Like I said, king f1 probably would be best here, but everything is still winning pretty much for black. He played the move rook to b3. So this is now move 5, I believe, and you can go ahead and see the winning sixth move, which is rook takes bishop. Now he played a surprising move here, which I'm going to go ahead and of course tell you that the rook can't be taken, because as far as king takes rook, we have the checking move, bishop takes pawn check. And bishop takes pawn check wins the rook back. No matter pretty much what you do here, I'm going to win a rook. The king has to move back, actually only move, and it's just going to be a strong position for black, possibly checkmate soon, and I'm up a piece. So he plays actually the correct move here, which is the strongest move in this position possibly, and I don't play the strongest move here, which possibly would be bishop to e5, because I still have this bishop takes pawn check tactic. I end up seeing, I thought for about a minute, and I was like, I really want to defend my dark square bishop, and trade down even more pieces. So I end up checking. Well, I guess I didn't have to move. We move, and I defend my bishop slowly but surely. He attacks my bishop, and now, of course, I am up a solid piece. Better, of course, would have been bishop to d5, keeping pieces on the board and keeping my dark square bishop, which is better than his dark square bishop. Objectively, of course, if I could go back into the game, I would have did this. However, of course, you know, winning with the piece up is not too shabby either. I'm actually going to sacrifice a pawn here, which I'm already up 2 pawns, and I'll be up. So I'll basically be up a pawn and a piece, and I was ready to trade down. So this is what a surprise that I was going to have for those that are 1600 to probably even 1200. At the end, I'm going to leave the game unfinished, which we played out until pretty much the end. And the game itself ends up being a little bit difficult, being that I have what is considered a bad bishop, if you're not familiar with the term. And I'm up a piece, but my bad bishop is hard to convert in this position. So I strategically, of course, make the decision to trade down even more pieces, which will go over the game. Objectively, I probably should not have pushed these pawns this way, because I made my bishop even more bad from what you'll see in the game. Strategically, my opponent, it looked like, put all of his pieces on dark squares from the get-go just to get into this position. But I think this was more happenstance and situational than what I think my opponent was masterminding, trying to play a defensive game. So my mistake right here that I feel that I made was playing this move right here. A slight little error, not necessarily a mistake, but a slight little error, which forces the exchange of rooks. But I think I should have kept rooks on the board in order, and gave a check here. And I was a little worried as far as king moving over. And then I think as far as my activity with my rook, this is a strategy, of course, like I was saying, with that dark square bishop exchange that I made earlier, is to keep your active pieces on the board, especially if your opponent's pieces are not as active. So that's just a tip and rule of thumb that you can go ahead and utilize in your own games. But it's just something that I think that I could have played a little bit better. I was actually down to about 20 minutes in a game 25 minutes, and I was like just ready to trade off pieces, which we got into this end game. Well, of course, we're already in the end game, and I was trying to restrict movement. We trade some pawns, trade a pawn, trade another pawn, And in this position, of course, I'm going to leave it up to you. If you're rated 600 to 1,000, possibly even 1,200 or so over the board or online, you can plug this into chess.com or Lichess and see if you can actually beat the computer. I'm telling you that the computer, this 1,500 played immensely well for this position. And I'm going to tell you this, that it's not as easy as you think to be able to convert this over to a win. Although it's completely winning, it's just not as easy as you think it is. You have to use a little bit of thought as far as strategy goes to convert the win over. I believe actually this is the game here. Nope, actually I made a mistake. No. My opponent's next move, I believe, was king back here. But as far as move order goes, this game was won, and I'm not specific. I would have to go over the exact game, of course, to give you the exact moves. So, but there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. From this move, of course, in this position, of course, is what I wanted you to go ahead and analyze. And like I said, if you're 1,500, you have problems with endgames, this is a classic bad bishop versus a lonesome king, which gets a little bit complicated. Like I said, so just a small little bit complicated that I said, that your engine probably is going to give you a run for its money. And like I said, the 1,500 played pretty well to be able to try to hold the draw. I'm sure he was desperate to want to get a draw. So, but thanks so much for viewing. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed. Leave comments and suggestions in the comments section. And if you're in the Atlanta area, I totally invite you to come down to the Atlanta Chess Center and come duke it out. Definitely come play. It is the chess center that GM Ben Feingold is owner / or whatever over the center. I don't get into the politics of it or the business side of it. I just know he's there. So thanks so much for viewing, and have a good one.